Hello and welcome to Discourse in Third Person, a podcast where we focus on the narratives found in video games, as well as the devices they use to tell a story. I'm Josh, and this is Jeffrey.
How's it going, man?
I'm doing good. So today, Jeffrey, I thought we would talk about Dragon Age 2.
So, why are we retreading a 9-year-old game, Josh?
Well, it was a highly divisive game when it came out, and it still kind of is today. But as I understand it, for the both of us, it still has a place in our hearts. And I think for our inaugural episode, I think that's really worth talking about.
Well, the people that dislike it are wrong. Jeffrey Chang here. We begin with topic 1, going through the criticisms of Dragon Age 2. Then topic 2, the themes around Templars and mages. And finally, topic 3, concerning the climax of Dragon Age 2. Anyways, here's topic 1. Oh, and a quick warning to our listeners, there will be spoilers. So looking back at Dragon Age 2, some of the common criticisms are that it was rushed, it used the same assets over and over again, it didn't have a lot of customization options, some other issues with the game in regards to the origin of the player character, as well as the shortened Act 3, some perhaps bland side missions, go fetch quests, things like that.
I do remember those warehouses just seemingly having infinite
Endless.
and waves upon waves of nameless thugs just popping
I,
in while you're trying to fight.
I remember caves with a lot of spiders in them.
That's right. Also caves, warehouses, and the like.
Thugs and spiders. What would have been funny is if they had swapped the thugs and the spiders. Like you go into the warehouse and you're like, oh, here's more thugs. Nope, surprise, it's spider time.
Spiders. Well, look, I could expect spiders in those warehouses, right?
You can
Well,
also expect thugs in caves.
that's true. Well, okay, so being you play in those caves and warehouses so much, it's become quite familiar. You've exactly where things
Yeah.
are going to be. So okay, so it was rushed. Is one very common criticism. I believe it what was the development time of Dragon Age 2, Jeffrey?
A year and a half.
A year and
Less
a
than
half.
2 years.
That is
Which is
crazy.
absurd.
That is 100% absurd.
Stamp it, ship it. This the EA game overlords came out and was like, yeah, that seems good enough.
Take a heavy drag from the cigar.
we got ship it by Q3, boys. gotta make that shareholder value.
Oh, that's true. Well, in light of recent BioWare controversy, and I'm speaking, of course, of the crunch time, the dreaded crunch time in video game development, and how BioWare was apparently, what was it, guilty of
labor abuses.
It, in hindsight, is quite harsh.
I'm pretty certain that it's EA Games' fault.
Well, that's fair. That sounds exactly like an EA Games thing.
But I think one of the major differences between 1 and 2, Dragon Age 1 and 2, is that Dragon Age 1, you had a ton of different possibilities for, choosing race, background, and starting position. So you could be a noble dwarf or a, basically an untouchable dwarf, an underclass dwarf, and the first 30 minutes of the game were completely different.
I believe there are 6 origins, right? And we're speaking, of course, of Dragon Age Origins.
Dragon Age 1, correct.
Right, Dragon Age 1. They're much touted origins. There are 6 of them. You could be a city elf, a Dalish elf, a human noble, a dwarf, a mage, both classes of dwarf. So yeah, 6 origins, yeah.
And instead, in Dragon Age 2, a lot of fans took issue with the fact that your name is Hawk. No ifs and buts about it. Your name is Hawk. You're a human.
Right.
You could be a human warrior, rogue, or mage, but you're human and you're from a specific family in Ferelden.
Mm-hmm. So I guess BioWare committed the sin of having your player character have a defined family name. It was reasonable why they did it, of course. In gameplay terms, it just easier to put voice lines so people could
Right.
address you, right? It's the same trick they did in Mass Effect with Shepard being
Right.
because you have to. It's just the exigencies of the narrative just needs it. The necessities of it is just there.
Well, I like that method way better than I like, let's say Fallout, where you're just referred to as the courier or the vault dweller.
That's true. So that's the whole can of worms in terms of RPGs and voice acting, isn't it? Having people having a defined name.
Mhm. Topic 2 of Templars and Mages.
So in Dragon Age, yeah, you had six possible origins, but in Dragon Age 2 you only really had two, as you mentioned, right? Human,
Yeah.
and I believe the only other thing, well, two, you could of course choose your gender and your class,
Right.
right?
I mean, gender did matter for romance options.
But I think of the two, the one that really had more of a narrative weight was if you were a mage.
Right.
Because eventually, throughout the course of the game, one thing that they really do sell you, or at least really explore, is the Mage Templar conflict. And playing as a mage, there is that added
Right.
dimension, the added layer of stakes involved. Like, are you going to sell out your fellow mage brothers and sisters and join the Templars, or at least have Templar sympathies, or do you join your mage brothers and sisters? So there is that definitely that added nuance. But to go from six to two, Jeffrey, that's a large number, especially in video game prologues or choices.
Well, I mean, my stance is that it all depends on execution. It's fine if you narrow choices for a player character.
Mm,
I know I'm going to take some criticism for that. But if they're executed well and it improves the narrative, I'd rather have a couple finely crafted narratives than six mediocre ones. I felt like there were four mediocre ones and two decent narratives in terms of the origins.
right, right. So I guess we've addressed some of the criticisms that Dragon Age 2 received when it first came out, and still to this day, but still has a place in our hearts, right, Jeffrey?
Right. I mean, I suppose the essential theme of the game is again the Mage Templar dynamic,
Right, right.
and it was done fantastically, and it really grabbed you and made you invested in the rationales of why each group came to its conclusion. So just for those that haven't played Dragon Age or Dragon Age 2, and again here there's going to be spoilers, in the world of Thedas, the mages are naturally born with magic talent. Now, as great as magic talent is, it also essentially brings or invites demons to try to seduce you into using your power to help them in exchange for more power.
Magic has a price,
And so the equivalent church, the Church of Andraste, has a religious
a branch.
military branch called the Templars, who are mage slayers, and they essentially police the mages, make sure there aren't any mages that have been given over to demons. Blood magic is what it's called. Now, I think this is I guess one of the key things that really hit it home for me was in the intro to Act 3. They spoke about how Meredith, the leader of the Templars, the more the mages pushed back, the more she cracked down on the mages. I really feel that it's a narrative about how tyrannies will sometimes naturally form from the concept of wanting to maintain order,
Right.
and then but through the actions of trying to maintain order cause the disorder that they're trying to prevent. But what do you think?
Well, no, that's fascinating as a concept. That theme. Are you familiar with the pithy saying, "The road to hell is paved with good intentions"?
Yeah.
concept. That is fascinating, actually. That Meredith, it's coming from a desire to maintain peace. Her methods, as flawed as they are springing forth from a source of nobility. When what is that nobility? To prevent chaos, to prevent suffering by demons, but ultimately, in that pursuit of safety and security, I guess sometimes humanity is forsaken for the sake of security.
Hmm. And I suppose, within the game, Knight Commander Meredith eventually procures a red lyrium idol
Which has been established previously
in
in the
Act 1,
course of the game. Yes, that it has,
intense magical properties.
and the downside to said magical property is that it causes you to go insane. So okay, that's interesting. That's right. That at the end, she does get possessed, or at least she indulges. Does she indulge, or is the fact that she turns to this red Illyrium doll or sword? Is it? Do you think it was the logical conclusion of the themes that we've been talking about? How in her quest to provide safety for the people of Kirkwall, she becomes the very thing she swore to destroy.
Yeah, I mean that's essentially it. Is with the pursuit of trying to maintain order, she threw caution to the wind and sought power for the in the thought that the power that she would gain would prevent these atrocities.
Right,
And then at the end of the game, really the power that she sought created atrocities of their own
right.
and pushed one of your companions to create an atrocity, which we'll speak about later.
So, not to mention, of course, when it comes to Knight Commander Meredith, is the arrogance, the frail human flaw of being able to think that they would be an exception to that rule.
I'd like to compare it to perhaps a car with an enormous engine, right? Where everyone feels that
Sure,
I'm skilled enough to control this until you're not.
until you're not.
But really, though, power doesn't usually corrupt. I mean, there's this game's theme is that
One of them, at least.
at least one of them is that good intentions or not, power corrupts or power will cause difficulty and hardship. But in real life, I don't think that's the case.
Circling back to the aforementioned criticisms earlier of Dragon Age 2, and they are valid criticisms after all. I would argue, and this is kind of why I like Dragon Age 2 a lot. It's a different game. It's a completely different game. And that sounds like a cop out, but in my opinion, when it comes to sequels, I think I would prefer a sequel that does take something of the setting or something that's established and just tells a different story, and it's not just rehashing something that's already been said, right? And
Right.
so I think the thing that I like the most about Dragon Age 2 is the thing that is one of the criticisms of Dragon Age 2, is that the scale is pulled back. The scope is pulled back. Instead of traipsing and traveling, gallivanting throughout all of Ferelden, you are only relegated to really within Kirkwall and its outside grounds. Instead of meeting all the different races in their home turf in Ferelden, you just have bits and pieces of that culture within Kirkwall, i.e., the example would be the alienage, the Dalish, the Elven alienage
Yeah.
in Kirkwall. Now, well, I think in those terms, the reason, just to put it into just one sentence, I think what I like the most about Dragon Age 2 is that I had the feeling that BioWare wanted to tell a story with Dragon Age 2 instead of facilitating a a story for the player in Dragon Age 1. Now, both of these are valid. If you want a story for your origin, for your warden, for your version of the warden. Your warden is a female city elf
Hmm.
who had to fight tooth and nail just to get respect and had to witness firsthand to the atrocities that is done to her people,
Hmm.
and you go on a revenge rampage, and you're now, just to escape execution, you join to be a warden, and you go fight the archdemon to show how city elves are just as
Capable.
yeah, exactly, as much of a maligned race they are. Here she is, the warden, fighting the archdemon. If that's 100% a valid way to tell a story, right? That's 100% the way to present it. What I like about Dragon Age 2 is you're really watching or playing Hawk's story.
Yeah.
I use passenger. Yes, you could make narrative choices for Hawk. You could choose the way Hawk interacts with the world. But at the end, really, there is a sense that Hawk's story is Hawk's story. What do you?
What is that story, in your opinion?
So for Hawk, I think it's really just a man or a woman who is reacting to things that life just throws at him. He or she, right? Hawk's story really is one of a man or woman just trying to do the best they could with the circumstances they've been provided. They really don't affect a lot of change in their setting. They're really reacting more than they are making choices. So Hawk fails a lot in Dragon Age 2.
Hmm.
Your sibling, whichever you pick, gets taken by either, well, one either dies,
Right.
gets taken by the Templar, or joins the Templar.
Could join the Circle Mages if.
Well, actually, I think if it's Bethany, Bethany always, if you don't take Bethany with you, she always gets shanghaied. She always gets taken by the mages.
Right. Always. Yeah.
Yes, always. And then not to mention your mother falls victim, falls prey to a serial killer. As much as you prevent further bloodshed, the Kunari's invasion, the Viscount falls, the Viscount's son dies. As much effort you put into stopping the Mage Templar War, it still happens.
How can a person, driven by such failures, keep failing upwards?
The So I think you've hit it right on the head as well. Really, you're given a glimpse into Hawk's life, the peaks and the valleys, the triumphs, the trials, the failures of Hawk, and I love it. I love how focused it is. I mean, comparatively speaking to the Warden, you're fighting the Blight, you're enlisting ancient allies in the fight against an evil horde. There's a clearly defined villain.
It's much more character, study than Dragon Age One.
Right. It's more character driven. That's true. And in Dragon Age 2, I mean, it's a story of people also failing, of communication breaking down, of a system that's flawed, and the people just trying to live the life that they've been given. The Mage Templar conflict. I mean, what was it? Unfortunately, with the aforementioned Knight Commander Meredith's turn,
Hmm.
because of the choices she's made as Knight Commander, you could sympathize with her as a person. I mean, you could hate her, right? But what is she gonna do
Right. Versus the Darkspawn, the
versus the
Archdemon,
Darkspawn?
which is completely, you know,
Oh, they're just evil.
right. It's just they're evil for evil's sake.
They're evil for. We're here. We're gonna we're gonna kill everyone. As opposed to Dragon Age 2, wherein it's flawed people doing flawed things.
Yeah,
So,
I think that hits it right on the head.
and I could see why. Absolutely, a valid criticism of it would be Dragon Age One wasn't that, and that's fine. I mean, that's an RPG. I mean, it's a tried old
Hmm.
formula for RPG, right? But I guess again, just to put a fine point to it, Dragon Age Two was more character driven and had more emotional weight for me, to be honest, than Dragon Age ever did, because of the scope, because of the scale. Yeah.
Topic 3, concerning the climax.
In terms of the overall game, however, there's one particular point in the story or in the game that I think we've had a lot of conversations outside of this podcast, right?
Right. So just to kind of set up, you're essentially a refugee, and you go to a, what is considered a free city, which is a self-governing city state
Right, and as I recall, you're running away from the blight from the
from the
first
first game.
Dragon Age, actually. Yes.
And you meet quite a lot of people along your journey, but one of which is a mage whose name is Anders, who was in the first game's expansion pack.
Right, Awakenings. Was it Awakenings? Yes.
So at the very end of the game, Anders, there's again a great conflict between the mages, and
Right.
the Templars are underneath the Church of Andraste, kind of, it basically the Catholic Church if they worshipped Mary as the savior. So Anders essentially uses a spell to lift and destroy, I believe, the church, right? The Church of
The Chantry,
Andraste,
yes.
the Chantry of
The
Andraste in Kirkwall, basically killing the bishop
the
of
Mother
Andraste,
Superior.
the Mother
Yeah.
Superior of Andraste,
Right, right.
and sparking all out war between the mages and the Templars. And just to sum up my feelings on it, I hated this moment.
But before we get into that point, I think one thing that we do need to at least catch the audience up is the fact that all throughout, and this is Act three of the game. This is pretty much end game.
No, Josh, this moment was terrible, terrible for gaming, a human disaster. Thank you
Was
for
it?
listening. Thank you for listening to our podcast.
that,
That's all you needed to know about Dragon
that,
Age 2.
that's all, folks.
Let me get my ukulele.
Just play us off, Jeffrey. Well, anyway, so this is Act three of the game itself, right? So this is very much end game, and I believe this is the point of no return. As in, after this point, after this quest, it is the precipice. You cannot go past this.
Yeah, there's no more side quests after this.
And so this point, at this climax, this climactic moment, is when both sides are about to, I believe, speak. They're about to have a talks, and then Anders, for better or worse, chooses to tip everyone's hand into a point of no return. And by the way, just as a correction, he blows up the chantry. Actually, not by any magic. It was pure alchemy.
It was alchemy.
It was alchemy. It's referenced in his quest. It's referenced in his personal quest. Actually, that he wants you to gather specific ingredients. It was bat guano, sulfur, and some other ingredient that is clearly explosive. Right,
Okay.
right, and that's
So I think that dovetails really well into why I hated
exactly.
this moment.
And we're gonna segue into your thoughts. Your thoughts, Jeffrey.
So the main reason why I hated this moment is I didn't really particularly care for Anders,
No, that's fair.
and I mean that's just preference, personal taste. The problem is that when Anders came out of the woodwork and then destroyed the chantry, I had no clue why he did that, or it seems so out of character for him.
Right,
All this time I thought he's part of your team, he's one of the good guys ostensibly. But he comes out and he does like a pretty evil thing. The regardless of what you think of the Templars, the Mother Superior of the Chantry was actually pretty decent.
right. No, she was shown to be sympathetic
A sympathetic
to
person.
a sympathetic person to mages and the Kunari, which
Right.
the immigrants, the foreigners who were, they were just different people. They were just different
Right.
people. Right.
So essentially, I ignored Anders throughout the entire game,
Right.
and then he comes in and commits this heinous crime,
Oh, absolutely. It was absolutely atrocious.
and it really. And my belief is that they, the game designers, did not do a good job foreshadowing and setting this moment up. They didn't properly plant the information for the players in order for this payoff of this heinous crime to happen. So it's one of those things where, again, you can go in and speak to Anders and help him gather the materials for this heinous crime. But if you hadn't been speaking with him this whole time, you completely miss those signs and miss those moments. And I believe that the game designer should have made certain things necessary to continue the game, certain paths mandatory, so that there is that plant and payoff. Because this moment is not skippable. You can't. There's no way around it. It happens whatever you decide. But anyways, that sums up the general premise of what I think.
Okay.
What do you think?
Well, no, it's just piggybacking off of that. It is interesting, right? So in other media, we had like film or novel. It's absolutely everything that you as a reader gets to see has to be planted by the author. There's no everything is on purpose, right?
Yeah,
So now I guess that is interesting, actually. I mean, how you're feeling is absolutely uh, legitimate, right? You just to clarify, you did not speak to Anders. You did not go out of your way to visit him throughout any of the acts.
no,
No, not at all. Okay, so what my point is in like books and movies, right? The director or the author has direct control of where you as a viewer should look at, right?
100%.
100%. And so, but in video games, there is an opportunity for for the player to just miss all that, miss anything like that. I mean, in even linear narrative games like I don't know, Uncharted or The Last of
Hmm.
Us, you can miss, you can still miss key character character comments that would just flesh out more of the character. And the one I'm thinking of at the most, I'll be honest with you, is like you ever played a game wherein the characters are speaking and you have your party with you and they're interacting with each other, building up camaraderie, and but
Yeah,
you don't move forward because it's gonna cut the
the dialogue.
the dialogue gets cut by other voice lines from themselves. The one I'm thinking of is something like Vermintide. Vermintide does that. There are cool little interactions between the characters, but then you hear them saying, "Oh, there's a rat assassin coming after us," so he gets cut. So my point is, I think what you're saying is interesting because you can miss all that. Because I will say that they do absolutely plant the seeds of Anders's quote unquote heel turn fairly well if you bother to speak to Anders, invest in
Right.
it.
And that's the essential thing, is that there are other moments that are essential. You cannot. There's no way to get around it. That does that does help establish certain characters, certain conflicts. Even in Dragon Age 2, you got to meet the mother's superior, right?
Sure.
I mean, and that's what makes it so shocking. Is like, okay, you just killed the mother superior, who was
Right.
otherwise a decent person. If if you could skip or go around meeting her,
Right.
then oh, he just blew up that building. There were some people inside.
Right. Right.
Like there are certain things that were planted that were required,
Right.
but this one part of it was not, and that was a flaw in the game, in my opinion. It ruined this character so much for me that later on I avoided him even more because I knew at the end what was coming, and I just couldn't bring myself to. I hated the character so much.
So that is interesting. That is fascinating, actually, because it does justify, or at least they do give a reason as to why, and it all depends actually whether or not you've pursued a friendship or a rivalry with Anders. So, if you, as you know, Anders has a demon, or rather, I forgot
A
what
spirit,
a spirit who's coexisting inside him.
yes,
Now, it depends on whether or not you're a friend or a rival. If you're a friend, you call him out on it that he is justice. You have become one and the same. You and the concept of justice have become the same, and so you do not even fathom humanity. You only see everything in black and white, and so you are no longer human, right? And I believe
mm,
the same is with Rival, in that Anders realizes what he's done is wrong, and he asks you to kill him, actually, because he doesn't know what he'll do next, right? So all of this, what I'm trying to get at is this: all of this content is behind the fact that you as a player character has to go out of your way to speak with a character to engender this relationship with Anders, right?
right,
And in some ways, and this is just arguing from the other side, it you have to work towards having to get to know this character instead of, I suppose, the narrative handing it to you.
right.
That's what I was alluding to as a video game, because you as a player character get to choose your level of involvement. So yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are ways that you can naturally make that happen. Like, you can an NPC come around and say, "I have a close affinity with Anders for some reason," and then make Anders a required part of your
Okay,
party.
okay,
There's ways to do it, and there's ways to give the player more choice, but push them towards having Anders in the party. But let me put it this way:
sure.
is there's a fundamental flaw uh, in Dragon Age if you're in terms of stumbling on Anders.
Dragon Age 2, right?
If you're playing a mage, you're already fulfilling the
Oh,
role of the mage of the
that's
party.
true.
And I can't for the life of me really remember what my first playthrough. I think it might have been Warrior. I can't quite recall. But if you're playing a mage and you're less likely to have another mage on the
No,
party
absolutely.
for party balance reasons.
If you're of that mind, of course.
Yeah. Then what ends up happening is that you avoid it for mechanical reasons
Right, right.
rather than avoiding him for story reasons. Now, I mean that could be, you could still definitely go out of your way, but it's putting up another layer between the player character and the planting of this crucial plot point.
Well, I mean, so pretty much what you're yearning for is that you want it to at least be foreshadowed that he's about to commit such a heinous action.
Right. I mean, or perhaps even you go through a mission, and if he's in your party, he's there, but if he's not, you come across him and happens to be there at the same time
Right, right.
on a mission, right? And you could put that Templars are attacking Anders and or came to hunt Anders, or there were things that could have been done
Right.
from a design standpoint, from making this essentially happen, and but still giving the player a choice.
So interesting because they do that, but you have to do the companion quest, right? And I guess your gripe, if I may be so crude to imply, I don't want to put in your. Would it be okay to call it a gripe?
My educated criticism.
Right, right. Is that since you didn't pick Anders, and it's completely subjective whether or not you pick it, and especially if you are a more mechanically minded, there is that added layer of why would I pick Anders, right? Why would he be in my party?
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. When it comes to Anders, I agree with you that maybe they could have foreshadowed or at least drop hints about it. But overall, I think it was fine the way it was, at least in my opinion, because it was previously mentioned. It was just you know how bad it was for mages and how the stakes were really high in that particular scene. I don't know. I guess I just like the idea of being able to be rewarded for interacting with my player with my companions. I just like that idea.
I will say that the shock was there, and it did feel like, okay, this is the climax. This is for everything right here.
It was quite memorable, wasn't it? In fact, we're still talking about it.
It did grab me in a way that a lot of climaxes in a lot of other games wasn't able to.
Okay.
It did have the intended effect, but it also made me hate the character,
Well,
and I don't think that was quite intended.
so Jeffrey, there is a concept in wrestling, in professional wrestling, which I do love, which is one of my passions. You either want cheers, you either want boos, you never want a dead crowd.
I can agree to that.
So you know what? I find it memorable. The climax of it. You found it memorable, but in completely different terms. But we can both agree at least that the Mage Templar conflict was really well done.
Yeah, and I killed Anders 5 times.
Reloaded that save every single time.
Go back, rewind, reload, stab him again.
So yeah, so Jeffrey, so let's talk about some closing thoughts. It's just in conclusion for our bit of a Dragon Age 2 retrospective of sorts.
Dragon Age 2, perfect game, no flaws, 7 out of 7, IGN.
The bit I believe is 9 out of 10. It's okay.
9 out of 10. I guess what I will say about, Dragon Age 2, if you can overlook some of its the rushed quality of the development, and you don't come into Dragon Age 2 with the same concepts that you have with Dragon Age 1, it's a pretty enjoyable game in my opinion, and it's a great character study, and it does allow you to find a specific tone or voice for the main character, the protagonist. But what do you think?
So I'll tell you this right now. I don't know if I'm digging my own grave here, but I could pretty much. I'm one of the biggest video game apologists. I could forgive a lot of gameplay of a game if there's that je ne sais quoi, that X factor that exists, that's present in the game itself. And for me, I think I really do like the presentation of both the setting and the protagonist, as well as the side characters, as
The companions.
the companions. Sure, I felt they were compelling, both the protagonist and said companions, and I really felt that I got to get close to these characters as well, and not just that, but also the setting. I really felt for Kirkwall as a city because, again, as mentioned, the scale is so intimate. It's so toned. It's toned down. It's reeled back so we could focus more on the characters themselves. Now, am I saying it's a perfect game? As I mentioned, there's a lot to forgive, and I completely understand people can't get past the repeated assets, the rushed nature of it. But yeah, I think Dragon Age 2, one of my favorite RPGs.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of RPGs, definitely in my top 5.
So I hopefully that's not just because we're contrarians, Jeffrey. Hopefully this podcast, or at least this episode, demonstrated our reasoning.
Definitely. All right, with that, thank you for listening to Discourse in Third Person. More episodes to come soon, and have yourself a great day.